my name's Rich Harrington, and welcome to this edition of Understanding Adobe Photoshop. Today, we're going to tackle the subject of layer masking. Now, a layer mask is a non-destructive way to hide or mask parts of a layer. Think of it as the ability to erase without actually throwing things away. And therein lies the importance. Many people delete pixel data from their images, and that can cause a lot of problems down the road when you might need to restore it or further modify the mask. So it's important that you use non-destructive methods, which is where layer masking comes in. Now, we have a simple image here where we want to extract the building. I chose this photo just for illustrative purposes here because the sky is going to be such an easy thing to make a selection, but you can use any image that you'd like. First off, in order to have a layer mask, you need a layer. And if you see this, it's italicized and locked. That means it's a background layer, not a standard layer. So I'll double click and I'll name this Castle and click OK. Next, I'm going to grab the quick selection tool, W, and start to drag through to make a selection. And that worked just fine. We selected all of the sky. What I'd like to do now is reverse that selection so the building is chosen. So I'll choose Select, Inverse. Now we have just the building. Now, in order to apply a layer mask, it's very simple. You just look at the bottom of the Layers panel. So if we click that button, you'll see it gets applied. Now, you could zoom in to see the layer mask there, and you see it did a pretty good job. Let's press Command H, but we have a few areas where some of the blue is still left. In this case, there's lots of ways to clean it up. You can make sure the layer mask is selected in the Layers panel and just select the paintbrush, get a little tiny brush there, and we could just paint with the color we want to add. In this case, adding some black, and that works fine. And if you need to add to the mask, if we were to paint too far, you could just flip over to white and paint with that as well. And you see it adds back in. So pretty straightforward. Just use your standard paintbrushes, black and white, to add or subtract. You can also use gray to get a transition zone. Additionally, with your layer mask, you could touch it up using any tools. So if I select the smudge tool and set it to darken mode, I could actually push the dark pixels in here and clean that up by just brushing over that edge, pushing them in like they were wet paint. And you see that's pretty simple. You of course also have the Masks panel in Photoshop CS4, and that allows you to access the mask edge, giving you a very similar dialog box to the Refine selection, where you have the ability to actually contract and smooth out your edges as you see fit. Of course, it's always useful to still have that paintbrush to go in and just touch it up. There we go. So let's zoom on up, and you see we've got a great clean selection. There you have a layer mask. Now, if you decide you want to keep the layer mask, you're all set. You could save this as a Photoshop file or a TIFF file, and it's stored with the layer. You could also drag this layer into a new document, and the layer mask will stay attached. If you choose to temporarily delete the layer mask, piece of cake. Just hold down the Shift key and click on its thumbnail, and you could toggle the layer mask off and on. If you permanently want to get rid of it, you could drag it to the trash icon, and at that point you're presented with a choice. You could choose to delete it, which will go ahead and just toss it away and restore the original opacity of the layer, or you could choose to apply it and it permanently discards the pixels, just like you push the delete key. I know, the language is just a little confusing there. Still, I highly recommend that you keep the layer masks intact because they're incredibly useful. Now, layer masking will come into play with lots of future lessons. I highly recommend you master this skill. It's definitely the difference between a beginner and an intermediate user of Adobe Photoshop. For Understanding Adobe Photoshop, my name's Rich Harrington.